Okay, L&T Finance is one of the leading NBFCs in the country, and Mr. Y.M. Deosthalee is one of the faces from corporate India you don't really get to often interact with, a man whose views are rather keenly sought out for. Mr. Deosthalee, good afternoon, sir, and thanks very much for taking time out and speaking to NDTV Profit. This is Bianca. You know, before we talk company specific, I'd like to briefly touch upon the growth shock and the mood in the economy and what's hurting growth. So even though the Q1 GDP numbers at 5.5%, they've been just in line with expectations, but the risks to growth, we all know, they remain. Do you think that the markets and industry, they've really factored in much lower growth targets, and therefore that 5.5% figure looks acceptable?
Good afternoon, Priyanka. The numbers on the face of it are in line with expectations. But I think there are a couple of things which we need to note. The first thing is that the capital formation is very weak. The second thing is the manufacturing growth is also not good. And I think these two are not really good signals. So urgently there are a couple of things required. The first is we need to focus on infrastructure and make sure that the engine of infrastructure continues to be vibrant. There is practically a lull in almost all sectors in infrastructure today. There is hardly any investment. You are aware of the problems of the power sector. Those power plants which are going to be operational soon are going to have some problems with reference to getting of coal. The other thing is that there is not much activity in terms of new development, and I think that is not a good signal. So I think on an urgent basis, I believe there is a need to focus on power sector reforms and make sure that new investment happens in power sector. We have talked a lot about roads, and it was said that more than 8,000 kilometers will be awarded in the current year. But I think the activity is not at that high pace today. So we need acceleration in all aspects of infrastructure if we have to bring about growth to some respectable levels. As far as manufacturing is concerned, yes, companies are not investing. The capex sentiment is not particularly great. That is partly driven by what is happening globally, and also if the growth numbers do not look attractive, I think people will be very cautious in terms of investing. So overall, I think there is a need to do 2-3 things. One is we need to bring back reforms in power sector. We also need to make sure that the investment cycle turns positive, and it has to be supplemented with some correction in the interest rates as well, because interest rates remaining high is not going to help investment climate. So the GDP numbers at 5.5%, not bad, but I think they need to be much more, and I think there is some deceptivity in those numbers.
Sure. And of course, the investment slump continues. Mr. Deosthalee, today once again, you know, after a whole week of seeing stalled parliamentary proceedings, we've seen the Lok Sabha being adjourned. Do you think politics is hurting economics? And are you expecting any sort of urgency in policy announcements from here on?
I think I won't comment on whether politics is hurting economics, but I think there is an urgent need for politicians to agree on economic agenda, and I think all parties need to sit together, because otherwise it will have very serious long-term repercussions on the growth of the country, and therefore it is absolutely essential. It is very difficult for us to understand as to why Parliament doesn't function, and this whole session nothing worthwhile has happened. While there are issues, we understand that they need to be resolved by dialogue and discussion. But if we don't allow the Parliament to function, it is not going to be productive for the country at all. And there are several bills which are pending. There are several issues which need to be resolved. I talked about a few of them. But apart from that, from the financial sector, there are bills such as insurance, pension. There is a Banking Regulation Act amendment which is pending. I believe there is also a microfinance bill which is pending. So there are several bills which are pending to be approved. We need to have discussion on this, and therefore Parliament must function, and that is basic. So while there are issues, those issues need to be discussed, debated and resolved, and for that there has to be some agreement that we need to work on pushing the economic agenda, and I think the political agenda should not overpower economic issues. I think political parties need to sit together and discuss on and have some agreement that we will discuss a few issues, reforms, because it will in the long run hurt the country very badly.
Of course, and that's what we are hoping to see as well. Mr. Deosthalee, let's come to your business now, to L&T Finance, and your business outlook on the financial services. If you were to maintain a 20% plus sort of growth rate, what would be the kind of capital requirements for your business, and will that require strong growth from, say, the retail and the corporate portfolio?
First of all, let me clarify, as far as the growth for the current year is concerned, whether it is 15%, 20%, 25%, we don't expect any additional capital, because we have raised capital last year, and I think the internal generation, and there is a scope for some additional gearing, and we will take care of requirement of capital for the current year. In terms of growth projections, let me clarify a few points. We have a portfolio of retail business, corporate business and infrastructure business. In infrastructure, if we have to grow in terms of our assets by about 25-30%, what we need is additional disbursement to the extent of about 3,000 crore. We believe that this is an achievable target. Even under the present circumstances, there are opportunities. We will look for those opportunities, and therefore we do not foresee much of a problem in achieving the target of our asset growth for infra business. Retail, which is L&T Finance, it's a diversified portfolio. That is our strength. If you look at our portfolio, we finance construction equipment, commercial vehicles, small commercial vehicles, agricultural equipment, tractors, and we also have a small portfolio of car. Considering this diversity, it should be possible for us to have a reasonable 15 to 20% kind of a growth in the portfolio of retail business without much of a problem, because the retail business continues to do well. We're not sensing much of a problem. We have to be cautious, considering that in some parts of the country monsoon has been a bit scanty or erratic. So we have to be cautious, but I think on balance we should be able to achieve a reasonable growth of about 20% in the retail portfolio in the current year as well. And if you look at the corporate portfolio, there I think the portfolio is largely small and medium enterprises. Lots of them need capital. One has to be very, very careful in terms of disbursement, but our supply chain business is doing reasonably well, and that should continue to provide the necessary growth for in the corporate portfolio as well.
All right. Mr. Deosthalee, if we analyze your exposure to the microfinance industry, how much are you expecting to have to write down in the current quarter, and if you are likely to see any significant impact due to say additional provisioning due to microfinance exposure?
Our total exposure in microfinance business is considerably small. If you look at our total book size of 26,000 crore plus, microfinance is just about 250 to 275 crores. We had a problem in Andhra Pradesh, and that problem was explained very clearly in March 11 itself. We had a portfolio of 193 crores in Andhra Pradesh, and you will be happy to know, and we have communicated to all our investors, that out of 193 crores, we have dealt with almost about 145 odd crores till the first quarter of this year. What is remaining is a very small amount, and some small recovery is happening. So we do not expect the microfinance business to have any impact on our results in the coming quarters. In fact, I expect from the last quarter onwards, there will be a positive impact. That's number one. The second, so the problem is restricted to Andhra Pradesh, and that we have dealt with to a considerable extent, to a large extent. What is remaining is a very small amount. But on the other hand, as far as the microfinance business in other states is concerned, it has stabilized very well. and we should be able to see growth in that, cautious growth within the parameters laid down by the Malagam committee. Also, it's very important to know that there is a good quality database which has been created now. So everybody lends within those parameters, and we should see a healthy growth in microfinance in the years to come.